to be able to introduce our keynote speaker, a dear colleague, Dr. Ibram X. Kendi, who is recipient of the National Book Award, an assistant professor in history at the University of Florida, and a proud member of the United Faculty of Florida, our faculty union. Because just because you have a PhD doesn't mean you're stupid. You need a union, right? In all seriousness, Dr. Kendi's book, Stamped from the Beginning, The Definitive History of Racist Ideas in America, should be on everyone's reading list. Now, why should it be on everyone's reading list, you ask? Just because we're historians, we love to assign reading, right? Well, Dr. Kendi's book should be on your reading list because some Americans cling desperately to the myth that we are living in a post-racial society, that the election of Barack Obama, the first black president, spelled the end of racism. In fact, Dr. Kendi's book demonstrates that racist thought is alive and well in America, more sophisticated and more insidious than ever. And as Dr. Kendi argues in Stamped from the Beginning, if we have any hope of grappling with this stark reality, we must first understand how racist ideas were developed, disseminated, and enshrined in American society. So brothers and sisters, please join me in welcoming Dr. Ibram X. Kendi.
Hello. So it's truly an honor for me to be here. I heard that there was another inauguration going on somewhere. I didn't really sort of watch that or participate in that anyway because I knew there was going to be the people's inauguration. And, you know, this is the real, of course, inauguration for us. And I hope you recognize that, right? You know, we create reality for ourselves. And this certainly is the reality for us. And so it's truly an honor for me to be here. And I'm not going to speak long, but I just wanted to sort of share with you a few thoughts. You know, I've had so many mixed emotions and sort of mixed ideas that I wanted to sort of share with you. First and foremost, you know, one of the things that's happened over the last few months, ever since the 45th president was elected, is that we've been looking for people to blame for his election. And oftentimes we've ended up looking around and blaming people who were close to us. Specifically, we've tried to blame those people who did not vote, or we blame those people who did vote but voted for a third-party candidate, or we blame the people who voted for the current president. But many of us have decided to blame those people who did not vote, and on the pretext that they are what caused this 45th president. And I just wanted to sort of share with you that it was actually voter restriction policies that was the most decisive element in this current president being elected. And it's not surprising to me that you would have the development of these very sophisticated voter restriction policies that suppress the vote, specifically in swing states. And the reason why it's not surprising to me is because really when we look at American history, you know, we've been taught this idea that we've sort of had this sort of singular march of progress, just this singular march. And, you know, some people would say, oh yes, you know, we've been marching forward, and at times, you know, we've taken a step back, and electing Trump is one of those times in which we're taking a step back, but then we need to sort of march forward. But what I wanted to sort of talk to you about is what I'll call the dueling history, or the dual history of America. And we've again been taught this sort of singular historical force of progress. And what I want to sort of talk to you about is there's actually been another force. And so I write about, of course, not only that we've had this force of racial progress, this force of racial progress that could lead to such a diverse set of activists before me, that could lead to the election of Obama, that could lead to the emergence of, for instance, a diverse middle class to a certain extent. But then we also had another force, another historical force. And that historical force I would call the progression of racism, or even more broadly, the progression of bigotry in America. And it's these two forces that have constantly been at war ever since a slaveholder decided to pen the American philosophy of freedom. Like, we've had these two forces, right? And so that is precisely how one force could lead to the election of Barack Obama, and the other force could lead to the election of Donald Trump. That's how one force would bring us here together, and another force would bring people together celebrating the election of somebody who has partnered with the alt-right, somebody who's talked about building walls, somebody who has belittled and denigrated women, right? I mean, that's how you can have both forces. And so what actually makes me hopeful and what makes me believe that this is only going to be 4 years is this other historical force. Is this other historical force, right? The force of love, right? The force of justice, right? The force of peace, right? The force of compassion, right? This is the force that you're looking at when you look around right here. Like, that is that force, right? And this is the force that we have to mobilize and organize in Gainesville, right? We don't, I mean, Washington, D.C., what Trump does, what Scott does, is irrelevant to what we do right here, right? We have to look around at our institutions, at our communities, at our policies, and even most importantly, at ourselves, right? Before I could sort of write a history and chronicle a history of anyone else articulating racist ideas, suggesting that there was something wrong and inferior about Black people, I first had to interrogate myself. I had to recognize that I had actually consumed racist ideas about Black people. Just like I'm sure there are women who are here who've consumed sexist ideas about women. Just like I'm sure there's lesbians and gays here who have consumed and expressed homophobic ideas about lesbians and gays. Just like there are working people here who've consumed and expressed ideas about working people that are simply not true. And so, we of course have to begin the work with ourselves. And then after we begin the work with ourselves, we have to begin the work with our small circles. And after we begin the work with our small circles, we can extend, right, those circles. And I'm actually quite hopeful. And one of the reasons I'm hopeful is because philosophically, I recognize that in order for you and I to bring about change, we have to believe change is possible. Like, who else is going to bring about change in Gainesville? It's not going to be the people who are here, right? It's not going to be the people who believe change is possible. Like, if you do not believe it is possible, then you're not even going to try. I mean, we have students all the time at UF who want to go on and do amazing things, right? Who want to apply to a particular graduate school, who would like to apply for a particular job. And then some of them don't believe that they could get in. So what do? They don't even apply, right? And so that eliminates the possibility, right? And so what I'm trying to say to you is, of course you can feel despair, you can feel hopeless, but you have to remember that at a philosophical level, you have to believe change is possible in order to bring it out. No activist, no true activist is a cynic. It is impossible. Those are just like oxymorons, right? An activist is against cynicism, because cynicism really is the kryptonite of change. Once we become cynical, it is impossible for us to be those forces of change, right? We're the people who are standing on the sidelines, critiquing the world and how bad it is, right? While not doing anything about it, not believing things can be changed, And then when things actually do change, you know, what do we say? Oh, well, you know, I mean, yeah, and change is possible. And that force has constantly brought about change. You know, I'm reminded in 1829, there was a young editor who recognized that slavery was wrong. Slavery was wrong in Gainesville, slavery was wrong in Mississippi, that slavery was wrong. This young editor was in Boston, and this young editor decided to start a newspaper he called The Liberator. This young editor I'm talking about is named William Lloyd Garrison. This young editor in 1829 stood up and said, immediate emancipation. At a time when slavery was expanding across the South, at a time when slaveholders were growing even more powerful, right? When all seemed lost, when slavery seemed extremely permanent, right? He had the wherewithal and the capacity to stand up and demand immediate emancipation, right? I mean, think about that, right? And I think if he had that capacity in 1829 to say immediate emancipation, if he had the capacity to then spend the next 3 decades trying to end slavery, right, with everything against him, why don't we have the capacity to stand up and declare an immediate end to wars? Why don't we have the capacity to stand up and declare, why don't we have the capacity to stand up and declare an immediate equality? Immediate equality, not gradual equality. You know, why can't we declare immediate equality? Right? Why can't we say an immediate end to exploitation? Why is that improbable? Right? Even though it seems improbable now, you know, we have to draw that line in the sand, right? And then spend the rest of our lives, especially the next 4 years, you know, trying to bring that about, right? We cannot be defensive over the next 4 years, right? We can't sit back and say, okay, what is he gonna do? And then spend our time trying to fight against whatever it is that he does. We will lose. That's a losing battle. When you are constantly on the defense, you are losing, right? We have to imagine a different world and spend our next 4 years trying to bring it about. Thank you.